Hi everyone. I'm Aishwarya Jain from the peopleHum team. Before we begin, just a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We have received an overwhelming more than 1,200 registrations for this event, and it is my absolute pleasure to launch the peopleHum Dream Team series on Leaders Hum. Leaders Hum has grown to be a channel of choice for leadership thought and has collected a library of material and interviews conducted over time from some of the most well-known names in the industry. Today, we have the opportunity of welcoming the top global minds to our panel, people who the industry and the world follows for their thoughts and knowledge. They represent some of the best in the industry for talks, consulting, and coaching assignments, and each one has multiple accolades, including books they've written or people and organizations they've worked with. We are here to discuss the theme of changes in work, the workplace, and the workforce in these pandemic times of uncertainty, for which we have the Dream Team here with us today to share their thoughts and opinions. And now for introducing the Dream Team to you. First, we have John Baldoni is an executive coach at Baldoni Consulting LLC. He's a globally recognized leadership coach who has been transforming workplaces and leaders for more than 2 decades. He's also the best-selling author of 14 books. Jason Averbook. Jason is the co-founder and CEO of LeapGen. Jason is a leading analyst, thought leader, and a consultant for more than 25 years in human capital management. Gordon Treadgold. Gordon is the founder and CEO of Leadership Principles Limited. He is a leader who is passionate to learn more, an internationally acclaimed keynote speaker, and a contributing author at leading websites like Forbes, Fortune, and Business Insider. We also have with us Molly Lombardi. Molly is the founder and principal analyst at mollylombardi.com. She's a researcher, writer, speaker, and consultant, and looks at the entire life cycle of human capital management processes. And finally, William Tincup, who's definitely the first among equals, the president of the recruitingdaily.com. William has written over 200 HR articles, spoken at over 150 HR and recruiting conferences, and conducted over 1,000 HR podcasts, and has been recognized as one of the most influential HR leaders in the world by a lot of internationally renowned websites. I'm also very thankful to our panel moderators, which include Jess Swanbank. She's the global community leader for digitization and the now of work. N. Sekar, COO peopleHum and ex-VP of engineering of Success Factors. I am very excited to be associated with Leaders Hum and peopleHum for this event today. We're expecting a spirited and engaging conversation with our panel, and so without further ado, let me pass this on to Jess. Jess, over to you.
Thank you so much for such a lovely introduction and for including all of these lively and spirited panelists. I have no doubt this is going to be a lively and spirited conversation. So just a few notes on how the discussion is organized this morning. There are 5 topics of discussion teed up for our 5 panelists. Each one of them will take a question, but we expect them to interact with each other and to comment on each other's comments. We're going to cover those questions in 45 minutes and leave ourselves 10 minutes to answer the questions we have no doubt will come in from the audience, since there are, again, almost 1,000 people listening to us live this morning. For those attending, if you want to ask a question, please use the chat channel to submit your questions for the panelists as we go. We'll be sure to take those questions throughout the conversation. You also saw instructions in an email earlier if you need help or their reference. And we also will be conducting flash polls every 10 minutes to get real feedback as we go from the audience. So if you can help answer your questions to those flash polls as you see them pop up, that would be very helpful. Panelists, are we all set?
All
Yes.
set.
All righty, let's go.
I'm going to start with Jason. I'm used to talking to this guy, so I'm going to give him our very first question. And this is around experience, Jason. We know the now of work changed everything when it comes to employee experience. We have found millions of employees now working from home who perhaps did it before. We have shelter-in-place policies still enforced to some degree in many, many parts of the world. And so suddenly we're seeing a remote workforce, more of a remote workforce than we've ever seen before, and probably for the foreseeable future. So how does that change our focus on employee experience to accommodate the new now of work? Especially when you consider 60% of the workforce in the US anyway, and most other economies will all now also be involved in the gig economy.
Yeah, so Jess, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel. Much appreciated. And thank you, the rest of the panelists, as well as thank you for moderating. When we think about the world we live in today, you know, it's a fascinating time. Sometimes it's really, really sad to think about that it takes a pandemic to trigger change. But the change that we're experiencing, a lot of people have been pushing for that change. A lot of us didn't know how it was going to happen. It took a pandemic for it to happen, which is unfortunate. Yet I truly believe, you know, being optimistic that on the other side of this, there's a lot of positive to come. We all used to talk about the future of work, you know, and what happened very quickly is we hit this bump in the road that turned into the now of work, which created this moment that said, hey, wow, you know, I've been planning for 20 years, workforce 2020, quote unquote. Yeah, and now all of a sudden, you know, we got workforce 2020, but in a different way than we planned. So when we think about the now of work, you know, I almost don't even like to call it remote. I like to think about our new model as distributed. And just we're distributing how work is done. And, you know, let's not call it work from home. Let's not call it virtual. Then all of a sudden we're a bunch of avatars. But really we think about work in a distributed model. And when we think about work in a distributed model, for those jobs that can work in a distributed model, it's going to change everything. It's going to change how we lead. It's going to change how we recruit. It's going to change how we develop. It's going to change how we as employees, what our expectations are, how we measure performance. So what it does is it really makes us rethink the value prop and how do we get the value prop across to the employee as leaders as to what it means to work now, where I'm not seeing you every day. I'm not talking to you every day. You know, my weekends may change. So this is the biggest change that's ever happened to work, you know, period, end of story. You know, it's not going to go back, not necessarily because of the coronavirus, because people are realizing that they can work this way going forward, you know, and three, you know, it's going to require us to rethink every one of our HR processes. You know, and for some people, they're probably pulling their hair out saying, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work. You know, for me, I'm like, goodness, because it actually allows us to reinvent ourselves as a function in this new now of work. So if everything else changes, would we possibly say that HR is not, that shouldn't change, that HR is not going to change? I think that would be a tragedy, which is why I'm so excited about, you know, where we're at now. And, you know, besides the health part, where we're at now and where we're going into the future.
Would the other panelists agree this changes employee experience for the better, Thankyou?
Yeah, I think as you asked the original question about experience, employee experience, I think that we become a little bit more purpose-driven as it relates to candidate experience, employee experience, alumni experience, customer experience, partner experience, essentially taking experience and looking at it 360 degrees and saying, how does one interact with or experience a company? And how do we actually think about and orchestrate those things? So that's the only thing I'd like to add. Jason covered most of everything else, I would say.
It looks like we have the first of our quick polls up. So audience, please interact and let us know if you think these shelter-in-place and lockdown protocols we've all been experiencing impact your mental well-being, wellness, and productivity. Goodness.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
Just really quickly, while people are voting, I think there's one more thing that's probably important to keep in mind, and that is that the concept of a physical experience and the concept of a digital experience, you know, have now merged together, and they will merge together from this point forward. So we can't think about, hey, what's our physical experience and then what's our digital experience? We now have an experience, you know, and it's for sure time for HR to stop thinking about, okay, well, here's the technology experience, and here's the experience where if we go to an office, there's one experience, and William said it really well, which is what prompted my my thinking on it, which is, you know, a candidate experience. You know, I don't have a candidate experience of someone. I should have the same experience no matter what it is, and it should be a digital first experience. And if we don't start that way, the way we end is not going to be something that meets the worker where they are.
And I would just build on that, Jason, to say that, you know, for a long time we talked about the fact that as employees we have one experience. We don't say I'm going to go HR now, right? We don't say I'm going to go learn now, I'm going to go payroll now. We go to work, and it should be one experience for employees in terms of all the different things they do. And to your point, it should be that for everyone who interacts with their companies as well.
But to that point, Molly, one of the key terms in that quick poll was productivity. Does this impact productivity? For those of us who are used to working virtually, perhaps for a number of years, maybe we already figured this stuff out. Do we have to learn how to be productive and to continue to perform in a new environment?
Yeah. Well, and I would say yes, because this is different than when I worked from home 5 years ago or 5 months ago even, right? Because everyone else is. So I used to be able to hide, right? And now everyone expects me to be available 24/7. So I think all of us are finding new ways to experience and interact for sure, even though we've been working from home or working remotely for a while.
I think the point about the productivity is a really interesting one. I think the real challenge in and around that is that the more engaged people are, the more productive we can get them. And the real challenge is going to be, how do you engage people when you're in a virtual environment? And I've been fortunate in that I've just led a multi-million-pound project for Fujitsu, and for me that was a 100% virtual project. I didn't meet a single person on the project, and I found it actually required me to change my leadership style to get the people engaged. We did get the good productivity levels, but it did cause me to go and change the way I did things. One of my physical leadership tools was managing by walking around, going and seeing people. You can't do that in a virtual environment. So you've got to find ways for some of these things which come from a physical experience to be able to either recreate them or substitute for them in order to drive that same level of engagement. And it can be done. It just requires us to be creative.
Okay. Hi, this is Shekhar. My second question is for William. It's interesting that we did talk about the workforce of 2020. I also wanted to get your perspective, particularly on the graduating class of 2020 and probably 2021 too. They're probably going to face one of the toughest job markets in our memories. In addition, of course, there is also the 33 million or so in the US who have filed for unemployment. Do you think the talent crunch is over with so many people in the job market coming together looking for jobs? And with such an economic downturn accelerating, what advice do you have for first time or even experienced job seekers to prepare for this kind of a job market?
Sure. I think first bit of advice, the future of work is me wearing more blazers, A. Not sure if anybody noticed that or not. Anyhow, to the question. I think the first thing I would do to everyone that's graduating both high school and college is I would go read Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, posted on LinkedIn an article and advice to graduates. And I'd also watch President Obama's commencement on Saturday, both of which kind of have similar themes, and that it's your time. It's your time to innovate. It's your time. And yeah, it's going to be challenging. And especially in Reid graduated in 1990. And he tells a story about all the adversity that he faced and actually how it made him better. Not made him worse, made him better. So the first thing I would say is go do those things. Second thing is look at your skills, look at who you are, and try to build either a young career around the things that you like, because you'll be better at the things that you like. As a job seeker, oh boy, the best advice I could give you there is to be patient, because on one level, let's say in December, we might have had 2,000 people to apply to a particular job. Now we're going to have 20,000 people that apply to that same job. That's going to take the patience of both the candidate, and it's also going to take a lot of patience internally with recruiters and hiring managers and sourcers, etc. So just know that things are going to take a little bit longer than they normally do. And to the last part of your question, are we in quote unquote, excuse me, let me use air quotes. Are we in a war for talent? In certain industries for certain jobs, yes. Let's take healthcare in the United States. In November, there was a job opening at every hospital, every major hospital in the United States. Today, there's still a job opening in every hospital in the United States. And guess what? After this pandemic is over, a lot of folks are going to burn out and get out of the industry for whatever reason. And we don't make enough nurses and doctors just to fulfill on the requirements that we need right now, much less boomers and X retiring and potentially getting more sick. So will there be a, again, war for talent? For healthcare workers, absolutely, 100%. There's a war for talent right now for healthcare workers. So I think you have to look in certain industries and certain little bubbles. Yes, there's absolutely a war for talent, but in most, no, there's still there's going to be a little bit more supply for a while. But like take software engineers as my last example. We don't make enough software engineers in the world to sustain the amount of demand that we want for software engineers. So we're still going to be in a war for talent for software engineers. That's not going to change. The pandemic didn't change that. Recessions didn't change that. Nothing changed that. That's just two examples.
And William, I would build. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
Go ahead.
You got to raise your hand.
I'm sorry. I'll raise my hands. Yeah, I would just build on that to say I would also be open to geography if you're looking for jobs, because I think there's going to be a lot of localized need. It doesn't mean necessarily out of the country. It could just mean a state over, but thinking about that, which is going to be difficult given the pandemic conditions, but also I just would be open to geography, because I think that's going to be a big factor in a lot of positions going forward.
I think there are a couple of challenges. I think one of the challenges is, yeah, it's going to be a tighter job market. But I think, when you've gone from what John was saying, from 2,000 to 20,000 people, the challenge is really going to be, how are you going to stand out? How are you going to differentiate yourself from the other people? And I think anybody who's just in I'll send a resume is probably going to find it very, very difficult to get a job. You're going to have to get on LinkedIn, create a network, build your authority, show your capability in other ways. Because if you're just relying on sending resumes, good luck with that.
Jason, did you want to add anything?
Yes, if I could. So it goes along very nicely with what was just mentioned. So organizations are not going to look at past performance. Organizations are going to look at future potential. And oftentimes what a resume does is talk about past performance. So really important to think about that, because I need to show off my adaptability, going forward, which means I actually have to prove that I can unlearn going forward in order to relearn what this new now of work looks like. So, I'm going to go along with what William said, but probably take it out exponentially. I always think there's a war for talent. I think it's a goofy word. I think it's a goofy phrase, but I think there's a constant war. I guess it's just a question of who's got the advantage. I guess there's sometimes that the candidates have the advantage. There's sometimes that the employers have the advantage, and it varies by region, it varies by job. But there's always a war, and if you're not at war, you're not trying to win the talent game. You should be trying.
What's good about that, Jason, is it assumes that talent is a competitive advantage, and then we all kind of agree that on some level that talent can, if done well, can be a competitive advantage. A note that Molly brought up, which I thought was really nice, about localization. One of the things that the pandemic has taught us is that we can also work from home, which we mentioned a second ago, which also opens up your job search. So maybe before, when you were looking for that VP of marketing job in Minneapolis, MSP to people that know, now you don't have to necessarily look at just MSP. Maybe now you look at all of America and you look at VPs of marketing jobs or the world VPs of marketing jobs. And so you both look at what Molly said and say, hey, there's going to be some hyper localization that's going to happen in the job market. You should definitely leverage that. But also because of this remote work, distance work, etc., I think it also opens up as a job seeker. I think it opens up your aperture to then be able to say, indeed, click all jobs in this category, and then start looking through all jobs rather than what we used to do is we used to kind of just center around the areas that we cared about living because we knew we had to go into the office, etc.
I
Go
say
ahead, Molly.
Gordon talked about managing and leading differently. I think you have to have a candidacy that's different. Network, talk to people. If you're not going to be able to run into people in an office, find new ways to network and reach out to people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I think there's one positive that came out from it. Not only can we get candidates from other places, it also came to me that I can work from the beach now. I think that opens up a lot of flexibility and options from where I actually want to work. I don't need to be close to the office. So if I want to be in the mountains, or yeah, absolutely. So I think there's some other positives as well.
Great.
Yeah, and if I could just add, you guys, I think the thing that's most, to me, the thing that's most important is, and this is the most exciting time in our career to truly rethink how we do things. And I think what's most important is that candidates don't approach things the way they did before. I was able to give an event to the 2020 class here in town on Saturday. The candidates shouldn't approach things the way their parents approach things, which is cool. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
don't think that's bad. It's cool. Recruiters shouldn't think about recruiting the same way that they've recruited in the past. Managers and leaders shouldn't be afraid to use video instead of flying people in to interview, which is a huge waste of time and a huge waste of dollars. So there's a bunch of things, but I think to sum all of those things up, and then I'll turn it back to Molly. To sum all of those things up is that we have to think about the world today, not the world 20 years ago.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, actually, I was watching 60 Minutes here in the US last night, and there was someone that said something about some of the greatest times of innovation have happened after pandemics, and that actually made me excited, not scared, because I think you're absolutely right, Jason. There's so many things that are ripe for transformation, not change or not intermittent change or incremental. It's really, it's going to be a springboard for transformation, which is exciting.
Thank you, Molly. Over to you, Jess, for the next question.
Yeah, we touched on the next question a little bit, so I might modify it slightly. I'll start with you, Gordon. We saw this word productivity pop up in the first quick poll. Now that we've pressed more people into working from home, working from anywhere, this whole remote workforce tool stuff, more people have been experiencing. I think two things played out. One, there was still this trust factor. A lot of managers, line managers, supervisors of work, didn't know if they could trust people to be effective and productive at home. So productivity went to suffer. But I think more people, I hope more people, actually learned perhaps for the first time that people could be more productive when they work from home. When you eliminate commutes into the office, when you eliminate the water cooler chat, when you eliminate all of the stuff. And so they were pleasantly surprised, perhaps, that human beings could be even more productive and work from home. Now, we've seen a trend start. Twitter started it. We knew somebody was going to. Some companies are saying you can work from home forever. Your job is able to be done from anywhere. You can work from home forever. You never have to come back into an office if you don't want to. Does this build a new work from home, sort of policy as perhaps the norm?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's some jobs that, you can do, you have to do in person. As you can see, I've got lockdown hair, and I don't think that's ever going to be cut virtually, although those avatars might help a little bit. But yeah, for a lot of jobs, we can actually do them remotely, and I think we should look to move, because there's massive benefits on all sides. The cost of going to work, all of the getting your suit dry cleaned, and the travel, the expense that we cause on the environment with the pollution if you take the train or such like. So I think there's a lot of benefits there. It's going to be lower cost to the employees because we don't have to go. It can be lower cost to the companies because they can reduce their footprint. So there are a lot of positives and benefits to it. And I don't think we should go back. And I do think this is going to be the impetus for a lot of companies to say, okay, we can do this. Because I just want to come back to the point of trust, because for me, that's an interesting topic, because, you know, one of the things that people keep saying to me, oh, I don't trust my team to work if I can't see them. And what I hear when people tell me that is I don't trust myself to be able to lead if I can't see my people. And I think it's two different types of trust, not trusting in your own ability to lead and get people to do the work that you want them to do. And I think we've got to trust in our abilities of leaders to be able to inspire people, to be able to engage them and get them moving forward. And on the productivity side, there are some things that are absolutely mandatory that we have to do. We had to do when we were in the same physical location, and I still saw a lot of leaders and managers who didn't do that. And that is that we've got to set our teams up for success. Give them clarity of what it is you're looking for, and then give them the tools to do it. And if you do that with people and you put them in a position where they will be successful, my experience is most people will take it. So we just have to do the same when we're working in a remote environment, and we can definitely drive productivity.
Molly.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I mean, trust is so important. Jason and I talked about this on his podcast the other day about this, how do you build trust? And one of the ways is by being trustworthy. You know, they're not going to run walls through walls for you if you don't run through walls for them. And that includes flying cover and making them successful and giving them credit, right? And it has to be in a new way than it's been done before. And I couldn't agree more. If you aren't trusting people, it often is because you don't trust yourself. And I've been lucky enough to have virtual teams for a long time. I always say, if I have to care where you are, what you're doing, we have a problem.
Yeah, and the thing about building trust is I never look to build trust. I never do that.
Right.
What I do is I just trust people right out of the gate,
Yeah.
and hope it works out. And if I trust them, people tend to respond to the fact that you've trusted them. So
Yeah.
few people actually betray a trust. Does that mean they don't make mistakes? Of course they make mistakes, but nobody deliberately goes out and breaks a trust. So I think if you really want to have trust, start by, as you say, be trustworthy. That's critical, but just trust people, and that will get it built right out of the gate.
Jason, what are your thoughts on this?
So, you know, you guys, I really respect everything that everyone says and completely agree with it. I think that there's two questions. There's a question of, can we and should we? I mean, and I'm kind of a little bit frustrated with the can, because of course we can. You know, of course we can. You know,
We are.
Yeah, there's jobs that can't be done that way, and you know, and they should, of course, they shouldn't be done that way because they require working on heavy pieces of machines, or they actually require like working with a patient hand in hand. And of course, there's teledoc from a medicine standpoint, and you know, there's things that are really important to think about. There's the should we discussion, which is really important as well. And you know, I don't want to forget the mental health part of that other polling question that was up earlier. Also, is, you know, for those of us that have, you know, kids running around, you know, or for those of us that have, you know, elderly parents, or for those of us that have, you know, whatever it is. I mean, you could name thousands of things. You know, not an office in your home.
Yeah.
You don't have the space to do it. You know, whatever it is, the way this is going to play out is it's going to be a balance. You know, we're going to look at balancing. I personally believe. I don't think there's an all in or an all out type mentality, because, you know, should we? Yeah, we should. Yes, reducing an hour and a half our commute every day so we could spend more time with our family would be great. But should I have an office with a door right here that, you know, kids could come running in every second? You know, does that add mental strain to my mental well-being? Probably as well. So I hate to answer with a depends, but I don't think there's going to be a one or the other. I think it's going to be a blend. I do think what we've done is we've opened the door to, can we? Yes. and we've gotten rid of a bunch of haters, excuse me, who would say we can't because our people don't know how to do this,
Yeah.
But I do think that I do think we need to very, very intentionally think about the other consequences that go along with it. From a care standpoint, from a parental care standpoint, from a mental health standpoint, and really ask not can we, but should we, and what should it look like, which is why I think we're writing the book together here.
Yeah, completely agree. So can I just say, I think we might see for a lot of this thing where people can't work from home because they don't have an office, we might start to see some more of this collaborative workspaces being used, where people just go to, there is one in the UK that I've just forgotten the name of, but it's like a shared work environment. You just can go in, there's a workstation, you can sit down, they've got coffee, they've got snacks, and you can do that. And it might not be that you work from home, but that you don't have that commute. You work somewhere that's very, very local to you. And I think if you're working from home where you're having to do it, if you're living in a bed sit and you've got to do it with the laptop on the knee whilst you're trying to take care of everything, that is going to impact activity, and we've got to set people up for success. So as you say, can we? Absolutely. Should we? Yeah, it depends. And then how do we do it?
I'd like for us, as Jason and Molly have both eloquently already talked about how we can use this as a moment of great change, is also think about the equities and inequities that are already in work. And not everyone, and in fact, Gordon, you just kind of hit it for me. Not everyone has a place. Not everyone has a webcam. So let's start with some basic stuff. Not everyone has a place where they can work from home. And so these collaborative environments, that might work out for those that can pay for a collaborative environment. So let's just, as we're thinking about this transformation and we want to broaden the specter of who we want to include and how we want to include more people, we're also going to have to be creative in thinking about that as well. So just kind of a sticky note as we think about transformation. We want to be more inclusive, obviously. And in doing that, we're just going to have to think about how does this create either inequities or equities for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. John, weigh in on this one?
I think, we've talked a lot about that. And I think I was just thinking, and first of all, in listening to everybody, I sense a lot of optimism, but also trepidation. So, and I think if we jump, I'm doing a new LinkedIn Live show, which I would call What's Next. And it's called Previews, Predictions, and Prognostications. And I'm talking to a lot of experts from science and economics and some business and people like that to get an idea of what post-COVID, if there is such a term as post-COVID, what it's going to be like. And I'm trying to think a year ahead. And so if we took this conversation and looked back a year from now, I think we'd probably chuckle at what we're saying now, because I love the saying from William Goldman, who was a famous Hollywood screenwriter, who said, nobody knows anything. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I think all of us have, all the panelists have had some interesting insights, but we really don't know anything. And so we do the best we can with what we have. We bring our people with us, and let's act with a sense of humility, because we really don't know what's coming next.
Thank you, John. So let's move on to the next question. It's actually a continuation to the employee experience that we talked about earlier. I know in one of the earlier questions, we did talk about how the digital experience and the physical experience are all becoming one for the employee. I know the term employee experience itself was touted about by multiple companies much before the COVID situation on how we need to improve the employee experience and so on. My question is to Molly here. Molly, do you believe that the current situation is actually forcing organizations to start emphasizing more on the employee experience and how they engage with the employees and how they have to be more employee-centric and so on? What role does HR play in that? Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I love what John said. I'm a big fan of The West Wing, and if anyone else is, what's next is kind of one of their catchphrases. And I always love that because we never quite know, but at least we're all moving forward, right? It's sort of a signal that let's move forward. And so I love, you're right, we don't know anything. What we do know is that it's going to change. It's going to be unusual. It's probably going to feel weird. So I think within that, what we need to do is do everything we can from an HR perspective to try and eliminate the fear and uncertainty that's going to come with that, right? By making sure that we're being human, by making sure that we are providing people with opportunities, with tools. I think that's the best we can hope to do, because you're right, we don't know what the future will bring, but we do know that we have tools and we have connections that we can use to sort of face that. So I would say that's the role of HR. The good news is I'm not seeing the layoffs in HR that we saw in 2008, right? But we are, so that people are acknowledging that might be important. We might not know exactly what they're going to do, but we do know that HR is going to be important to make sure that we're learning skills, we're providing tools, we're communicating. I think that's going to be the biggest role that organizations have, to make sure that the employee experience includes all those things. I said something on Twitter the other day, don't worry about employee experience right now, worry about being human, right? Because if you're human and people feel that connection, engagement will come.
Oh, this prompted some reaction. What about
Sure. I think as Molly was thinking, I was thinking about the Nostradamus, and
Of
those that
course
have
you were.
studied, yeah, those that have studied Nostradamus. I think he made about 11,000 predictions, of which maybe 7 or 8 are about accurate. so, so I think your point is really spot on, is that we're going to look a year from this, maybe even 2 or 3 years from this, and just kind of scoff and laugh at some of the things we've said, and some of the predictions that other people have made as well. It's just, that's a part of kind of predicting, is that you're going to be wrong, 99% of the time.
And Jeff, I want to go back to something John said, and then I'm going to tie back to something that Molly said, which ties back into something William said. Sounds like a game. It sounds like a game here. But so first of all, I love what John said about we don't know. But the second thing that I really want to make sure that we don't do is wait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I just have to say it, because we don't know stuff in our lives ever. And I don't want us to sit and wait for someone like Tin Cup or Lombardi or Averbook or whomever to say, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be, and then we do it, because it's not going to get us anywhere. We need to create it together. And guess what? We're going to make mistakes, and guess what? It's going to be wrong. But if we don't actually do something, it's not going to change. And people are going to go back to the way it was. So I really want the fail fast mentality to be something that we practice, and adaptability to be something we practice. The other thing I think that's so important about experience is it going to become more important. I mean, anyone that, I'm not saying it's not a good question, but the question is like, oh my God, like, do you realize that everyone in the world stopped working at the same time? And do you realize that everyone in the world's lives got basically tipped over one way or another at the same time, including their families, including their friends, everything that they knew? There's not one person that walked into 2020 thinking that this is what we were going to be talking about on May 18th, 2020. So for anyone to say that experience doesn't matter right now is insane. Of course it matters more, and it has to be humanized. It has to be humanized. Now, is it going to be, oh, that payroll transaction has to be better? No, like,
Right.
Let's focus on what really matters now when it comes to experience versus what we thought mattered coming into the year. And I think that sorry to tie up multiple things together here that were said, but I just think that it's really important that we keep pushing forward, keep trying, and remember the now that we live in, and not what we think it's going to be, but also not go back to what it was.
One quick thing to wrap that up. One is, I always talk about putting paint on the wall, whether it's your career or the world at large, right? Don't be afraid to put paint on the wall. I've never, even in my young career, got in trouble for trying something. I got in trouble for not doing anything, but I never got in trouble, even if it was totally wrong. If someone could say, well, not that, right? That was at least moving us forward. And so I think you're absolutely right, Jason. We have to keep asking, we have to keep acting. And the other thing I'll say is, I always used to say, even in 2019, hey, remember all those 2020 reports we wrote? I bet they're all going to be wrong. Now they're really wrong, right? None of us wrote this HR 2020 paper.
Dude, some of us are old enough to remember when we wrote reports about Y2K.
Oh, yeah.
Tin Cup and I said the world was going to end. you know, or maybe Tin Cup didn't, but I'd said the world was going to end. You know, how good was I there?
All right, I'm going to give our fifth question to John before we jump into Q&A from the audience. And, you know, sort of like Jason said, we experienced true collective trauma, global collective trauma, and a complete dysregulation of everything we knew about how to live and work, all at the same time, globally. Like there's never been anything like this. And a few people, you know, a percentage of the people who are also experiencing this are leaders who are called upon to lead us all forward and through. So how in the world can they be expected to know what to do when they're experiencing this for the first time too? So John, when you think about the next normal, the next, you know, after this, as we move forward and through, what do leaders need to be thinking about? What are they considering as they think about how to operate in whatever is next, the new normal, whatever you like to call it?
Well, thank you. It's a good question, and I like what Jason said, and I agree with him about while I'm being skeptical about what's next, they're not skeptical about it, but being skeptical about predictions, we must move forward with the best information we have, and that's very important. Stasis is not going to get us anywhere. Throughout my career, I've always been asked at keynotes or whatever, what's changed in leadership? And I always love that question because I can be a little bit flippant and say nothing. Because in truth, the values in leadership that are time immemorial. What's changed is the context. So what I say is going forward is, while we're living in an unsettled time, certainly, let's remember our values. Our values have held us in good stead. They'll hold us in good stead as we move forward. So hold to our values, that will shape us forward. That's what leaders, in my opinion, need to be thinking about.
Yeah.
I'd actually love to hear from more on this question before we take Q&A. It's such a great question. How do leaders move us forward, Tin Cup?
The values word for me is again kind of one of the pillars, I believe, of the future of work, and it's how we hire. First of all, you have to live your values, so there's that part. B, you've got to kind of know and state and kind of revisit your values, but you do everything through your values. So you hire, you promote, you do everything. So you even react in a global pandemic based on your values. And so everything is values driven or it's not. And so I think that there's more of an emphasis on values and values-driven leadership, and then it permeates the entire organization or it doesn't. And so I'll let Jason go because I see his hand raised. Hey, Jason.
Yeah, just if I could, you know, I think the thing that's really important to understand, and a lot of people some people aren't remembering this, is that the adaptability factor that everyone's had to go through in the last 3 months is is crazy. And if you would have told the workforces as a whole that this is what you're going to have to do, you know, you'd have a massive revolt. If you would have told all the school teachers in the world that this is how you're going to have to teach, you know, you'd have a massive revolt. So coming out of this, we're going to have a whole new level of adaptability, which I think is very, very important. People are going to be more flexible. People are going to be more human. People are going to be more loving. Now, is it going to wear off? Yes, probably. But for the most part, I mean, I'll tell you, I have 2 boys, 15 and 12. I talk about them all the time. You know, they're watching leadership right now in their teachers and saying, oh, I've got some teachers who are really stepping up, and I've got other teachers who I haven't heard from. I was like, what do you mean? You know, and they're like, dude, like, we just don't understand, like, they won't even communicate, and they're lost. And I think that that people are identifying leaders based on what's happening right now in a different way than they ever have before. And I think after this, people are going to be able to say, hey, my leader checked in with me every day. My leader asked how I was feeling every day. My leader actually got us online just so we could see each other's skin. And I think there's other leaders who are just absent and waiting for something right now. And I don't want to be too blunt, but I think those leaders are done.
Yeah, I agree with you. point that John made earlier about, you know, the question we keep getting asked, what's changed in leadership? And I agree with John, the answer's nothing. What was good leadership before is good leadership today. The thing that has changed is that we are seeing the bad leadership a lot more clearly and how ineffective it is. And as we move to these virtual environments and where we have to be much more able to engage people over distance and inspire them, that's really highlighting and differentiating who has leadership and who doesn't. And I think that's what we're going to see. The bad leaderships kind of diminish a little bit, or people that don't have the good leaderships are just going to fall away.
Gordon, do you think it's a kind of a litmus test on leadership on those that rush folks back to the office? I mean, will you, on some level, intellectually or emotionally, judge leaders for those that kind of rush people back from remote work?
I think so. Yeah, I think we've. For me, leadership is a lot about having and demonstrating compassion. So what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we take people and you know, we have a duty of care for them. So if we can get them back safely, and then yeah, let's do that. If we can't do that, then what are we doing? And yeah, I would judge people. I would look at that unfavorably. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would
also,
just add,
well,
sorry.
I also think as well, coming back to what you were saying before about what was said before about, you know, we've got to take advantage of this system. You know, should we rush people back if we can make them productive at home? Why would I need to do that? If you're able to do your job from home, why would I put you at risk?
I think the level of transparency around good and bad leadership is so much clearer, right? It's all documented now, right? It's on social
Yeah,
media, it's on webinars.
yeah,
And I think the fact that people are going to communicate about what the experience is like during and after, what if there
yeah,
is an after, right? I think the
yeah.
transparency level is just so much higher. Sorry, William.
The light is brighter and the corners are fewer for bad leaders to hide in, for sure.
Yep.
Well, one of the things that I've actually written on just recently is employer of choice awards and layoffs. And so the people that promote themselves as a best place to work, great places to work, etc., and then lay off 40% of the workforce, maybe, just maybe, call me crazy, maybe they're not a best place, great place to work if they lay off 40% of the workforce. Second thing, Gordon, something you said about allowing people to come back or not, I think whether that is tied back to that employee experience is in choice. If you're productive and the outcomes are met, well, then choose where you want to work. If you want to work, from home, fantastic. If you don't, fantastic. Like if you want to come in, I actually know some people that want to they want to avoid their house. They want to go to the office. They can't wait to go to the office. That's a totally different issue. Way off to the side.
Well,
But you're right, William. It's true that some people are more productive at the office. I think for a long time before this, I was talking about the bifurcation between the self-motivated and the sort of self-directed versus sort of motivated by leaders or motivated by their environment. And I think having that choice to say, you know, we talked about our cubes more productive than open plan or whatever, you know, and asking me, where are you more productive? Are you more productive at Starbucks? Are you more productive at home? Are you more productive in our office? And having that choice be much more transparent, much more accepted, no matter what the choice is. Sorry, Gordon.
So I think people are most productive when they're set up for success. And you know, is the environment a contributor to that, or is it clear direction? Is it the tools that they need? Give people what they need to be successful. And we also talk about empowering people. You know, tell them what you want to achieve, and don't necessarily tell them how to do it. Maybe what we're going to be adding to that now is don't tell them how, and don't tell them where they need to do it. Let them make that decision and surprise you with a high quality output solution.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those wonderful answers. I think we have 16 minutes here, but you know, we've a lot of questions from the audience, and I'd really like to just take 10 more minutes for us to go through that, if that's okay with the panel.
Sure.
So the first question is for John, and it's from Ed Chipolsky. What will be the role of mentoring in the remote workplace? Is Ed's question.
Well, mentoring and coaching will be of paramount influence because people need a helping hand. Also, when you mentor, you learn. So as everyone's talked about, you're going to learn what's on other people's mind. The biggest mistake, and Gordon, I know, addresses this issue, is that leaders assume they know what people are thinking. And of course, if they live in their own world. I know, William, with your work, and Jason too, you guys have your finger on the pulse, as does Molly. But I think the mentoring will pay off because we'll learn how the organization is evolving. So it's an excellent question and something to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
Agree.
And I think being a mentee is going to influence your ability to find new jobs and find new connections too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. The next one is from Mary Wilson, and this one's for Molly. What are your thoughts on impacts of building relationships, collaboration, and communication?
I think it's going to require a new skill set. I mean, I'm an introvert at heart, and it may not be obvious from today, but I like to be quiet alone sometimes. So that's been good for me. But it also means during this time, I've actually been reaching out more. I'm not being a lone wolf. I'm being more participative, and I'm getting on more Zoom calls and things like that. So it requires a different muscle, and I think that's okay. But I think it's also realizing that, again, it's not about what you did before. It's about what's next and how can you adapt to the new environment. Because this is how people who I talk to once a year. I mean, Jason, I probably talk to every week now. It seems like, and he and I would go twice a year, maybe. William the same way, and other people as well. So I think part of it is just learning new skills to reach out and being willing to do that. I think it's also knowing when you're fatigued and when it's not who you are and when it's not what you need. But so having some self-regulation is important. But I think that's going to be so important. Find new ways to connect.
Absolutely. Thank you
Agree.
so much. Right. The third question we have is for Gordon, and this is from Jirain Tataria. What changes in business will happen after the lockdown?
Everybody take notes.
What changes in business? I think for me the biggest change or the biggest opportunity is that what we thought of as possible has just been trashed completely. The opportunities are so much bigger now, and we should be looking at challenging absolutely everything. You know, we've gone through a period where we've seen a lot of things come in, and companies have disrupted business. Uber have disrupted taxis. Airbnb have disrupted the hotel business. COVID-19 has just disrupted everything, and I think the companies that can rethink and re-look at their businesses are going to be the ones that profit really, really well. I mean, my brother is a mountain guide, and he takes people out trekking. And as you can imagine, when you're on lockdown, that is a business that's just closed down. There's nothing you can do. But he innovated and actually worked out how many steps it was to go up the local mountains, how many to go up Mont Blanc, how many to go up Mount Everest, and got people actually doing the trekking in their own homes, which was for me, I was massively impressed with his innovation. And I think businesses, we're going to see a lot more innovation and a lot more change, because what were barriers or perceived as barriers are now going to be realized are mirages, and we're going to be able to make some big advances. And if we don't do that, that would be a huge disappointment and wasted opportunity.
Sure.
I'll just add to that. I think some of the things that we used to think of as barriers for people with disabilities are now just natural parts of how everyone's operating, right? I can't climb Mount Everest. I have Parkinson's disease and I'm out of shape, and but I could climb it in my house, right?
I climbed Mount Everest. I did that during the lockdown.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's also going to be an opportunity, if we seize it, to also include more people in our workforce with tools we're already using. It could be very easy to not include people for those reasons. But I think the fact that so many people are used to Zoom, so many people are used to remote work, so many people are used to people working from different conditions, I think we can seize it as an opportunity to really bring more diversity and more inclusion into of all sorts into the workplace.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jason, I'm so sorry I didn't see your hand there. You'd like to add something?
No, I think just really quickly, I mean, what I was going to add, my thoughts, fleet. So, I think one of the things that's really important, one of the things that's really important about it is that, and it goes back to fleeting thoughts, is organizations can't stick with one strategy for as long as they used to, especially right now. So, organizations that built out a 3-year recruiting strategy, or organizations that built out a 3-year digitization strategy, or even a 1-year digitization strategy. I mean, you heard us on this call say we don't know what's next, which means, we need to, I always say that if you're driving a boat, you can take your hand off the wheel for a while if the water's calm. If the water's choppy, you have to hold on. And right now we have to hold on. And as we're holding on, we need to shift left and right as the world changes around us, which some people love, some people hate. But the concept of a static strategy, at least for now and maybe forever, has to be gone. And we have to realize that, we may have to change here and there. And I think that if I could, give a piece of advice back to the original question, like stop doing static strategy, make it much more agile, make it much more fluid within your org.
And that's why values are going to be so important, right? Because the values will stay while the strategy shifts.
The values are your barbed wire fence, Molly, that was where I was going. Thanks to you for adding my fleeting point. The barbed wire fence are your values. What you do within the barbed wire fence, you don't want to run into it, but run around and play and try things. But those values, that keeps you within the same universe of thought and keeps people aligned. So thank you for reminding me, Molly, of my fleeting thought.
Anytime.
Absolutely. Beautiful answer. So quickly, the next one's for William, and it's from Siket Das. Do you think the job market will evolve with respect to the pandemic? Do you think if it's a good time to switch jobs?
Hey, William.
Yeah.
But before you answer that question, could you get used to someone saying your name like that? I think that she says it so nicely compared to I say, hey, Bill.
Let's face it, there's usually a modifier or two on the front end of that, William. Yes, I would love for her to do my voicemail, actually, because then I think it would be an upload or an uptick in respectability from mine.
From Texas.
Yeah, exactly. Howdy, y'all. I think the job market, first of all, I think that, yes, the changes in the job market, both candidate side and employer side, again, I think, with patience, if you heard the earlier part, I think that we've got to have patience as candidates, but we've also got to allow that the organizations are going through this massive change inside. And again, they should be going through this change, as Jason and Molly both mentioned, that they should be taking this moment as a moment to change, while at the same time hiring. I think there's a couple points that I would point out to people on the company side or the employer side, is take down jobs that aren't real jobs. So if you have jobs posted on your career site or Indeed or whatever, and they're not real jobs, or maybe you were in December, you were hiring for this and you're not now, take those job posts down. Secondly, anybody that's in the candidate process, that's made it into the process, let's say they're 3 or 4 steps in, pick up the phone and call them and tell them if the job got froze, tell them the truth. Just let them know what's going on with the job. But this is fundamentally, it's changing because the way that we think of candidate experience is changing. And Jason mentioned earlier about video interviewing. There was a real reluctance for people, both on the candidate side, ironically, and on the employer side. There was a real reluctance to embrace video interviewing. Now, no reluctance, zero reluctance, zero issues on both sides. So something like that takes this pandemic to get us to kind of change. It gets the candidates to then say, yeah, I could do a video interview, not a problem. Let me just shoot that from my phone, not a problem. Whereas before, that would have been a bit, that would have been a barrier. And employers, I still remember, HireVue coming to market and some of the others that came to market, and there was such a conflict of like, well, we really want to see them, we want to talk to them, we want the team to meet them. All of this, basically, it was excuses to not transform that part of the business. Now all of that's gone. That's all been eroded. And Gordon, I know you had a note.
No, I was just going to say, it's amazing how zero options get rid of resistance. Sometimes.
That sums up my dating
And
life
enough
in
pain
my
can cause
20s.
I hated cheese until there was only cheese that was available to eat, and then I found I could eat it. But so
Yep.
yeah, zero options can change things quickly.
Turns out.
Thanks, William. Quickly, the next one is for Molly here. For reskilling, what do HR departments need to focus on besides learning and development? And this comes from Zeba.
Wow. Okay. One thing I would say is payroll, because you can't get that wrong right now, and how people are paid and where people are paid, and not just compensation, but actually payroll itself, because having financial security means emotional security, means physical health these days. So I'd say that's a huge part for people. I've been looking a lot at the intersection of payroll and wellness, which may sound weird, but when you think about today's situation, people who don't have, whether you have a job or not, if you're worried about money, your health is going to deteriorate, which is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the US is medical bills, which causes stress, which causes health problems, which causes financial problems, right? So this idea of making sure that we need to be learning and growing. We also need to be really taking care of the basics, getting it right, and making sure that people have access to their funds, people have new ways of thinking about managing their financial future, because I think that's going to be so important, especially as people are emerging from this weird time where there's all these, there's unemployment, but there's all these other insurances. They've been furloughed, they've been working for other people, they've been having part-time jobs. Helping people manage that process, I think, is going to be really important. Making sure they actually are financially stable, which is a compensation issue, but also an actual physical pay issue as well. William?
Something that you just touched on it is it relates to after this pandemic, and it's all going to be kind of at different times for different people in different ways. But and I won't say PTSD,
Yeah, but
because
similar.
but trauma, right? We've all consumed trauma, and we're consuming trauma. And I think we're going to have to, from a workplace perspective, I think we're going to have to confront that trauma somehow, in probably multiple different layers and ways, but for different employees, and just be there for them to deal with some of that trauma. Jason?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just one more thing, if I could, and I'm just going to say this really quick and really blunt. Digital is not IT's job. Digital and how digital works is not IT's job. Like, stop that. Digital needs to be a component of everything we do, how we think, how we act, the change management component of it, things like that. If that's not part of your HR function today, in my personal opinion, your HR function should go out of business. IT should be there to enable and support your digital strategy. If you count on IT to create your digital strategy, you will not be successful. And that, to me, is one of the huge skills that HR people need to get over, is the fact that that's not their job. That is their job. The only way we work today is leveraging digital. We live in a digital economy. It's not IT's job. It's our job.
You know my favorite saying, Jason, sorry, I just jumped in the queue, but I always say, if the tools would solve the problem, we'd all buy the tool or sell the tool and go home, right? It's always in context, and I think that's really HR's job. Sorry, Gordon, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, you didn't. I don't say anything anyway, so I'm good. And your point was excellent. Just 2 points. One is on that digital's not IT job. I've worked in IT for 30 years, and I built sales systems, and sales was never my job. I built marketing systems, and marketing was never my job. And now we're building digital, and as you say, it now seems to be IT's job. That cannot be the answer. You cannot be the answer. The IT is not full of entrepreneurs or people who understand business. That we're tool jockeys, code merchants, great at giving the tools, but somebody's got to pick them up. And for me, if I was giving advice to companies on what's the #1 skill that they should be looking to do, and this is a little bit biased because it's in my field, but by the by, I would seriously start training people on how to lead in a digital environment. The virtual environment is going to become much more. We're going to have more and more people at homes. And if you can't train your leaders to be able to lead people productively in that environment, then there'll be a move from those leaders to start pull people back when it doesn't need to happen, or you're just not going to get the productivity. So please. And You know, I've been working for 30 years in roughly the same kind of role. First job, everybody was in the same room as I was. I've just spent 10 months leading a project where I didn't meet a single person. It is different. We do have to adapt and focus on people so much more. We have to focus on involvement, engagement, setting up water cooler opportunities for people to have that informal conversation with us. It can't all be, you know, go to meetings where we just come in with an agenda. We've got to have that kind of semi-social aspect of the work as well. And leaders are the ones that have got to initiate that and get it started to create the engagement and involvement.
Two things, William, and then you can go. One is, I think this idea of, it turns out digital requires us to be more human than ever, right? We have to actually connect with people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I would just want to also say, I mean, Jason and Jess have been hosting this Friday afternoon podcast that I've joined quite a bit. And as someone who is a sole entity, a sole proprietor, having a community that's not just your own business, a water cooler that's not just your own people, can be so valuable as well.
No, I was just going to reiterate. Molly put it perfectly. It's amazing that as we move more digital, we have to be more human. And I think that'll be a surprise to a lot of leaders. But if you cannot increase that human component, you're not going to be able to bridge the leading in a digital age and environment.
Yeah, I remember now. It was globalization. Basically, one of the things that's beautiful about a great digital strategy and a great remote strategy, however you would like to phrase it, is you stop thinking about the four walls of wherever you live, and you start thinking about all the different places where you can both collaborate with different people, you can hire different people, you can promote for different people, but you start looking at globalization differently through a digital lens than you do through a non-digital lens, if you will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and go to you know, what you were saying, right? A very interesting question here that, you know, we know about the messages from Uber and Airbnb. They were a sharp contrast for announcements of job losses, right? And one did it on a 5-minute Zoom call, and the other one had a long, compassionate letter to their employees. But in the end, if people lost their jobs, is it failure of leadership, or it's just, you know, that stuff happens and you move on? What do you think, God?
well, if a business goes bankrupt because of the way the leaders have run it, but if you've got something like COVID-19 and that's just sucked all of the demand out, then I don't think you can blame the leaders. But then it's a question of how do they manage that? And as you say, if we let everybody go by text message, that's appalling leadership. You know, we've got to show compassion in every single thing we do. Compassion in recruitment, compassion in leading people and doing the job, and then compassion when it comes to letting people go.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example of that for Carta, C-A-R-T-A. Basically it's a shares company where you can manage stock in different kind of companies, and their CEO, it's worth looking up. Their CEO basically came out and said when they did layoffs that your managers came in and fought for you, and they built a list, and I'm the one that made every single layoff decision, every furlough decision, every layoff decision I made. So blame me because I failed you. They didn't fail you, I failed you. So it's my fault. And if you're angry, you should be angry with me. So the thing is again, we talked about it. We've used the word humanity and empathy many times during this webinar. If you've got to furlough people, and I've had to, I think everybody on this call has had to go through this bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to do it, there's a humane way to go about that.
Yeah.
And that's all. That's all. I mean, I think that's what you should expect. A basic requirement of leadership to have is to be humane.
Well, it's a choice, isn't it? And if you choose not to be humane, what does that say about you and your value system?
That's right.
Right, absolutely. All right, so moving on to the last question, and you know, feel free to jump in. This one's from Vanessa, and it is for William. The world has been following go where the talent is. Has this changed with the trade wars and the go local movements that are being launched?
Yes and no. Again, there's different countries that have different economic incentives for people, or even in different municipalities, if you want to do something in the US, that do different incentives for people that hire local. So I think there is tax incentives that are available for folks that hire local, that hire, let's say, folks that maybe don't get a normal chance, or don't get a chance like a lot of us. But I think so, to balance out what you see in localization and hiring, you've now, because of COVID and because of remote work, I think now everyone's kind of, what I say, the air is not going to be easy to put back in a bottle for employers. I think that's a good thing, and it's also a good thing. It's a great thing for candidates, because now they can open up their aperture. That localization, if it makes sense for a company to hire someone local, fantastic, and especially if there's a tax incentive or if there's some other type of incentive, that's great. But they can also look at the world as their talent pool now. And I think before, there were some talent acquisition leaders that did that, that had that mindset, that looked at the world and said, Google is my search engine for talent, you know, and basically I'm going to go find the best talent in the world and figure out a way to work with them. But that was a tiny percentage of most of the global TA leaders. Now I think most global TA leaders that wake up today, they think of, well, I can look at localization, and if there's an incentive to do so, either based on my company or based on taxes, great, do that. But now I can look at the entire globe and say, where's the best talent for this particular position? If it's in Sri Lanka, fantastic. Then I'll hire that person in Sri Lanka. But before, there might have been, not might, there was actually a barrier for a lot of TA folks to even think that thought. They would have thought of all the barriers. Oh, what are we going to do with the time zones? And oh my gosh, how are we going to communicate with them? Blah, 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 blah. Well, all that stuff, we've proved to ourselves that, yeah, that's not really a barrier. It's a false barrier.
Yeah.
I would just add to that, I think for local frontline jobs, we've realized how essential those are. We need to find ways to compensate companies for hiring people local for those local jobs. The person who works at my grocery store, the person who works at my pharmacy, the person who works at my healthcare office, the person who works at my school, those people have to be local, so we need to pay them to be local because they can't open up their aperture because they need to be physically where their job is. And so we need to find ways to compensate that, as well as finding opportunities for people who are able to do other jobs.
I would say as well that one of the things that I think we need to do is that, you know, if it's not about price, if it is about, you know, getting the best talent, then what we shouldn't be doing is we shouldn't be looked to being protective and just say hire local. We should be actually looking to train the local people so that they are the best talent. We should, you know, the government should be saying, how do I make my people the best I can make them, rather than how do I shut the door to people that are better than mine because I can't be bothered preparing them for the current world.
And if I could just add one thing just to it really quickly, we don't know where the talent is. I'm just be kind of blunt about that. I mean, you know, the concept of go where the talent is, we don't know where the talent is. And you know, one of the things I'd like, I mean, and that, you know, some of you may argue or disagree with me, but I think what has to happen is we have to take the shackles off and say, you know, I'm not hiring necessarily for a job. I might be hiring for a task. You know, we say, hey, I may not be hiring a full-time person. So the concept of go where your talent is, while I'm interested in the thought, I don't think that anyone in the world can claim they know where the talent is, because I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. And B, we need to first identify what do we need and what's the job and what do we need done, to then determine what kind of talent do we need. The matchmaking algorithm between what the talent wants and what we need, in my opinion, is 100% more complicated now than it was pre-COVID. We don't have time to go into all the reasons, but you have a lot of people. You have a lot of people with a lot of different needs. You know, childcare, not childcare. Everything's changed, which is just really important to keep in mind as you try to come up with an algorithm for, you know, go where the talent is.
I think one of the big leadership changes as well that we're going to have is that what I would call asynchronous leadership, where you know, if we want everybody to be on the same time zone as we are, and we want to be able to have synchronous conversations, you know, we send a request, we get a response back immediately, that's going to close things down. If we can, and certainly when you're working with different time zones, I've done that for quite a while, you've got to get into that habit of working with people that are on different schedules, and it does then become asynchronous. And I think if you can do that, that can actually open it up to a lot of good talent that are locally that might not be just available to work the specific hours that you want them to, and not necessarily what they would need to do the job.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for those wonderful answers. We have more questions coming in, but respecting everyone's time, we have hundreds of callers on the listeners on the call. Thank you so much. It was a very, very engaging conversation, and I'm so thankful to our panel members and to Jess for accepting our invite and for the high energy and engaging talk. I would also like to thank all of you individually for your support leading up to the panel discussion and for being part of this journey. I really hope to see you back again on our show on behalf of our audience on Leaders Hum and all over the world dialed into this panel. Thank you so very much. We surely do live in a very interesting time. And I think Jess, reiterated that resilience at the end will win the day. And a quick note, do also register for our next Dream Team panel discussion that's on the May 28th. Stay safe and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you on the panel.
Bye.
Great input and advice.
Unprecedented.